Hi, I'm Dyllan.
And I'm Salma. Welcome to Caring About Care, the podcast that shines a light on the care experience campaigning movement in England from the 1970s till, guess what, today.
This is a story that hasn't been told enough, one of courage, community and change. It's about those who grew up in care and the allies who stood with them, fighting for rights, recognition and reform in a system that often overlooks our voices. On this podcast, we'll begin this journey now by uncovering hidden stories, sharing personal stories and honouring the work that shaped today's care system. Our guest today is David Akinsanya, a journalist, campaigner and advocate for care experienced people. David's story is one of resilience, creativity and a relentless drive to change perceptions around children in care, from his career in broadcasting, including Channel 4 and the BBC, to his grassroots works in communities. David has used his voice to raise awareness and push for better support for young people. So firstly, I just wanted to say, hi David, it's amazing to meet you, and it was lovely chatting a bit before we started the podcast. My name's Dyllan, I'm a National Voice ambassador. I'll sort of pass over to Salma as well to say hi.
Hi David, nice to see you again. I'm Salma and I'm also an ambassador for National Voice.
Great. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure for you to be here. And I was just sort of wondering, just because we'd like to sort of start just to get to know you a little bit. So can you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing at the moment?
I'm actually working on a secret project for Netflix. I've signed NDA, so I can't tell you that. What can I tell you? I'll be playing myself in it, which is in that I'll be being filming somebody else. So that's all I can say. But it's probably going to be a 5-part series for Netflix.
That's amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, but my mouth literally just dropped. That's incredible. Yeah, I hope it goes well, even though you can't tell us much about it.
Yeah, I've signed the NDA, so unfortunately I can't say any more than that.
Can we get a role in it as well? Like, I would love to just,
We're filming a
possibility.
We're filming a pilot at the end of the month. And obviously, once we get going into filming, if we keep in touch, if you want a little role, Selma, I'll do my best.
Oh, don't worry. I'll be staying in contact after. You said it, not me, okay? And of course, like your journey from being in care to becoming a journalist, and now this special project, which I'm gonna hold you to that, is remarkable. How did it fold for you?
How did it evolve?
Like, how did it kind of your journey of being in care, and now, like, with everything that you are doing, like, how is that process for you?
Okay, when I was in care, one of the things that I was really interested in and good at was drama. And so I always went to a drama group and I learned how to learn lines and things like that. And I thought I was going to be an actor. Unfortunately, social services or the care system wouldn't fund me to go to drama school, even though I got into one of the best drama schools in the country and I got funding from the education department. Social services wouldn't give me funding. I like to think that nowadays they would do, but in those days they didn't. So unfortunately, all my dreams were wiped clear and I ended up doing a bit of time in custody. I did a year in prison. And when I was in prison, I realised that I wanted to be a journalist. I became obsessed with newspapers and reading about what was going on. It doesn't reflect my politics, but I really loved the Telegraph. I loved the way people wrote and I loved the length of the articles that you could get in there. So I wanted to be a journalist and I came to London homeless, sofa surfing, which a lot of young people from the care system end up doing. But I got some work producing a video for a group called Black and in Care. And I produced a video with some other campaigners about what it was like to be Black and in care. The issue had not been looked at before then. And when I was making this film, I just got a real buzz. And I was able to work with the producer who worked on that on a couple more films, sort of education films. And I just started applying. I just started telling everybody that I wanted to be a journalist. I hadn't any formal training. I started doing this work for the Sunday Times, which is, of course, is a really prestigious newspaper. And but I kept on applying to the BBC for jobs and they kept on telling me, well, you're not right. You've not got the right education. Why don't you go and work on this Black programme? And I said, no, I want to get in the same way as everybody else. So I applied for a trainee assistant producer job and I got it. And that was 2 years
Amazing.
worth of training. And at the end of it, you're pretty much an assistant producer. Um, but I went on to do research. I was the youngest producer at Channel 4 when I produced a series called Sex Talk. And, I was only 24 or 25 and I was producing. So I was really, people always say it's about luck and who you know and all those things. So there was a lot of that involved. But also, I worked really hard. I also had access to a community that a lot of my colleagues had never even come across. So when I was doing things around young people, crime, all those sorts of things, I was working on a daily program called Kilroy. And they had to bring 60 people into a studio to talk about one topic. And I found that all the other teams were coming to me for real people because everybody they were getting were PR, suggested by PR or suggested by organisations. Whereas me, they'd say, do you know any one-legged lesbians who live in Hull? And I'll say,
My
yeah, I
God.
do. So it was kind of like that. So, and I worked really hard. I made sure that they needed me all the time. So that got me a really good reputation. And
So you
eventually,
did it by yourself, technically.
say that
You did
again.
it by yourself. Like
Yeah,
everything that you did it by yourself, which is
yeah.
amazing.
And I've got a kid now. There is no way I could have done that job with a kid because it required so many hours and so much commitment. But then after a while, you end up working on programs like Correspondent, This World, which are like 90-minute documentaries. And, once you get to that point, I felt like I'd done everything I set out to do. I wanted to be a producer by the time I was 40. I did it by the time I was 24. Um, and then obviously I got to work on really nice big documentaries, traveling all over the world. I mean, literally, I've been all over the world. And I'm not showing off. I'm just saying because that's what that kind of work can bring for you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, what was your favorite sort of like place around the world that you visited, like when you were a journalist?
To be honest with you, I think South Africa. I spent 6 weeks in South Africa making a film for BBC Three when they first started. It was called The Rubber Man, and I took 1 million condoms to South Africa to go around talking to people about HIV and AIDS, which is a very, sad subject. But actually, when I looked at the film, because South Africa is such a beautiful place and everybody was so warm to me and we got such good visuals, I would say that's my favorite film that I've made. It's called The Rubber Man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I haven't heard of that before, but I'll definitely sort of try and find that later. That sounds amazing. And yeah, I wasn't expecting you to say like 1 million condoms, but like, yeah, it sort of took me by surprise. But it sounds like such an amazing thing and like really powerful as well. Like to sort of like go out to that sort of, we say is it South Africa? You said you went
Yeah.
out to. Yeah, that's
Well,
incredible.
AIDS was a big issue in South Africa, not just for gay people, but for straight people. And the idea was that if I took a box of condoms to a village, we could at least be doing something to make people, because there were a lot of suspicions around condoms as well. They thought that there was worms in them and stuff like that. So I had to, mess up what they thought they knew. Basically, it was just that condoms are covered in oil, and if you put them in hot water, the oil comes off, and everybody's thinking that's worms. Well, it wasn't. So I did that, and I also got to meet Nelson Mandela then as well. So and
Are
Beyonce.
you serious? Oh
That's
my
amazing.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was a really good film. I loved that film.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely check that out later. Yeah, so like moving sort of aside from sort of the journalist thing, we'll come back to that a little bit later if that's all right. But I was just wondering because I think before you sort of mentioned about Black Ink Hair and sort of was that established in 1983? Because I think we were sort of like having a bit of back and forth here
Yeah,
about that. So yeah,
it was 1985, 86. Conference. We did a
yeah.
conference in London which drew young people from all around the country. It was supported by an organisation called the Children's Legal Centre, and they were very involved in a lot of the campaigning I did for the National Association of Young People in Care. NAPIC, have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Mm,
worked for the National Association of Young People in Care as a development officer for a few years before I went into television.
yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, and sort of that's kind of like brilliantly follows on with sort of our question now, sort of about, can you just tell us a bit about Black in Care and why it was needed? Because from when we were sort of speaking about this before, I mean, please correct us if we're sort of a bit incorrect with it, but we're sort of thinking that Black in Care came out from NAPIC as sort of a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about it, if that's all right.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
there was a black worker at the Children's Legal Centre, and NAPIC used to be based in their office, and so it was good because we had expert lawyers around and people who were very concerned about children's rights. And I think Kay Williams suggested that we should do a conference for black kids because, like me, I never had any black foster carers. I never had a black social worker. Actually, I did have a black social worker, but it wasn't my black. It was actually a man with a turban, which was nothing to do with my culture or where I came from. So it was about making sure that they were recruiting black foster carers, making sure that black social workers people were encouraging to come into social work so that there were people there that reflected, we were meeting kids who were scrubbing their skin, who were bleaching themselves, who were so unhappy about being the color that they were, that we wanted to do the conference. And we got loads of stuff that came out of the conference that we wanted to tell social workers they needed to be doing more of this. Hair and skincare. I haven't got any hair now, but when I had hair, no one knew how to look after it. I mean, a lot of black people would look at me and say, "Oh my goodness, you need to get yourself, to a good hairdresser," because I would just go to the local hairdresser who would just either cut it all off or, do it in a very strange way. So, yeah, there was a big need for it. There was a big need for people to concentrate on what the issues were for that particular cohort of kids in care. And I'm proud to have been involved. We made a video afterwards. And actually, the video was one of the ways in which I got into kind of filmmaking, because I used to see how people used to react to the video. And I thought the television is so powerful and you can
Well,
change people's minds through television. And one of my
Definitely.
big goals in being a journalist was to get people on TV who weren't normally on TV. Rather than having a social worker talking about kids in care, why don't we get some people who've actually been in care on television? So I did lots of programs where I included people who had been in care. I addressed some of the issues on Kilroy and various other chat shows and things that I did. So it's really important to me that I carried the banner, if you like.
I'm glad you broke that like barrier between, being in care and then the ability to obviously speak out because again, what you're doing is amazing and like I've never thought that there was someone that could have like done that prior to obviously meeting you. So again, amazing work.
And I am 60, so it was a long time ago.
You don't
So
look it, it's fine.
thank you. Thank you. I think
Cool.
a filter, there might be a filter on or something. But yeah, no, seriously, I mean, we're talking about 40 years ago. And what makes me really proud is knowing that there are still people around. In fact, there are more people around now who are willing to get up and fight for our rights. And, that's why it's important that we don't forget the people who are coming behind us. I'm always one of these people who doesn't pull up the ladder. I'll put a ladder out to help people up afterwards. That's my philosophy.
Incredible. And I think you sort of like naturally sort of come on to the next question that I was going to ask about sort of since sort of Black in Care was first sort of like created like back in the 80s, like how do you think like it sort of things have changed since then and sort of what sort of areas do you think still needs to sort of be improved if you sort of
Yeah.
feel comfortable answering?
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think one of the sadnesses for people like me at my age and I don't want to put you guys off, is that I get a bit frustrated. I get a bit frustrated that things that we were talking about 40 years ago are still being talked about today. And, the system has become more fragmented. I think in those days it was a lot clearer. You didn't have all these fostering agencies and private companies and voluntary organisations and this, that, and the other. It was all a lot more straightforward. And so I feel bad that I still keep seeing young people outside 10 Downing Street handing in petitions. If I'm being honest with you, because there's lots of people around rallying up support for campaigns, and then I mean, even some of the young people I still know now who are saying, "Oh, we're at the House of Parliament the other day and we did this and we really socked it." And I'm thinking, we have been doing this for 40 years. and not a lot has changed. Things have changed, but not a lot has changed, especially around black kids, because now there's the Black Care Experience organisation run by Judith, and they're still calling for some of the same things we were calling for. So this is why we need generation after generation to be putting the pressure on. I'm glad my fist is in this, putting the pressure social all those people, you know, because they need to be told. I read the other day that people are still moving around with black bin bags. I thought that was done with
Oh
you,
yeah.
you know. So it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's really good. And I got so much out of campaigning that has helped me through the rest of my life, you know. So what you're doing, advocating for other young people, is going to be really useful to you as well. So keep doing it, you know, and we need to get the next generation up doing it as well, because these politicians, they're very self-interested. And if you
Yeah, I
think
don't
about, you know, where we come on in the ladder, we're right at the bottom. So we need to keep punching up to those people.
Mm. I don't think there's ever going to be a point where obviously we're just like, getting along with the politicians, everything else, which of course would be the ideal thing for us. But I think we just need to keep fighting every single day. And you are right. Especially for me, I'm always talking to the younger kids that are like 13 about, speaking up a little bit more and, fighting for their voice to obviously be heard. And, you know, from seeing what you've done like 40 years ago to the point that we're still doing it now, it's kind of crazy. But I think if we do keep speaking up, we are going to make a difference one day. And I truly
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah, and I would never say that nothing that we did ever made any difference. Of course it did at that time. You know, the 1989 Children's Act, we were involved in giving evidence. You know, if we hadn't have been involved and we weren't giving evidence, they would have got it really badly wrong. You
That's
know, so
crazy.
we do need to be at the table.
What evidence, if you don't mind me asking, did you obviously show? Because I'm really interested.
We
Yeah, me
told our
too.
stories. We told our own stories. We told the stories of we represented young people in care and went along to various parliamentary groups and get-togethers with different political parties, and the Department of Health. You know, the Department of Health will always offer out an olive stick to us to get involved. It's just about how meaningful that is and whether it's just paying lip service. Oh, we've consulted the young people. Oh, we've consulted ex-care people. If they're still going around with bin bags, then you haven't done enough. We've told you about this for years and years and
Yeah.
years, you know. So it's just about, and it is right, Sam, where it's keeping up the pressure and preparing the next generation, you know, to be prepared to stand up, you know, and not everyone can do it. Not everyone can do it. It takes a particular type of person who's got the courage to stand up and get up on stage. How many times have you been up on stage and told social workers what you want, you know? And it's about making sure that the next generation do the same.
See. Um, Moving on to the next question. Well, thank you so much. Like, it's amazing to see how obviously we're from different generations, but the fact that we still are fighting for the same thing, it's crazy, and our frustrations are the same. And yeah, I just love the community that we have within the care system and being care leavers, and I think it's really powerful. So the next question that we do want to ask you is, in your broadcasting career, what stories have resonated the most with you and why, which you kind of
Yeah.
hinted at?
The other thing that I did was I took advantage of being in the media, and I made a documentary about my own life, which was called Raised by the State. And in that film, I've got goosebumps because my dad has passed away now. But I challenged my dad on camera, and it was put on TV, and that was so good for me and my dad. We had a different relationship after that because my dad had seen how messed up life had been for me in care. I was glue sniffing, you know, I was getting involved in all sorts of criminality, which I would never have done if I'd have stayed with my dad. Um, and so doing that one particular project where I told my own story as well as those around me, I think challenging my dad on camera was really one of the most important things I did. And it really repaired our relationship. And in fact, the 8 years he lived after that, we got on so well. And it was so good for us to have done that. even though it was very challenging for him, because I'm saying, why did you put me in care? Well, I got the answer. He didn't. He tried to get me back. He showed me letters that he wrote to lawyers, lots of money spent on trying to get me back, and he couldn't. I've since seen my file, so I now know that social services in those days just didn't give kids back to their families, and that they were racist. And they made racist assumptions about my dad's family, saying that because my brothers and sisters were so well behaved, I've actually seen the notes. They assumed that there was corporal punishment going on in the house. They assumed. Well, there wasn't. My dad never laid a finger on my brother or sister, and they're still around to tell me that. So, I think that project was one of the best for me, because it allowed me to talk about the care system, but also cathartic for me to be able to challenge my father.
I see that for opening up, um, especially with, being like, individuals of color, it can be quite hard to, be fully taken, well, as equals in the care system. And yeah, well, thank you so much for that one. But I also wanted to kind of reflect back on what you said earlier on, which was, a lot of people understand and listen when it's more of personal stories coming from actual care leavers.
Yeah.
What role do you think that plays when obviously influencing the public on what care experience is and what that actually means?
It's like, I'll just tell you one thing. When I see fostering adverts these days, and they're pretty much begging for people to come forward to help these young people and children. And, I kind of look back and I think to myself, the system has become, I think young people in the care system now are like commodities that are to be moved about. And, it's not easy for today's generation of kids in care, I don't think. I don't think there's enough residential care for people. I, for one, didn't want to be in foster care. I really didn't. And I sabotaged all of my fostering placements. I only ever stayed at any of them for about 2 weeks. I wanted to go back to the home, which was home for me. Nowadays, you've got all these profit-making organizations who are setting up these satellite things. They're buying houses in cheap areas because that means their profits are better, which means kids have got to travel further. There's a lot to campaign for now. But in the past, it really was about children's homes and foster care. Now we've got kinship care. That's another
Yes.
area that's come up, which is really important, because a lot of kids should stay within their own families. That's where they get a sense of belonging. I think the minute you take them out of that and start putting them in children's homes, but you can have good children's homes. I had 10 perfect years in a beautiful children's home with wonderful staff. And then obviously after that, it went downhill. But, I have got good examples of residential care. And I think that we've done a disservice to children in care by getting rid of those. And also residential schools. I've worked in a few residential schools and as an adult, and they've got merit as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of these big organizations shut them down because there was a lot of abuse going on and all those sorts of things. But abuse is only going to stop when you challenge it and confront it.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, and this is actually something that we're sort of like weirdly talking about sort of yesterday, just like having a little bit of discussion about it, about sort of, yeah, which is like the right placement for young people in care, because I think we're saying that there's sort of lots of advantages to being in a residential home, and sort of for foster care as well. Like sort of there isn't like one perfect
No.
approach for like sort of any child sort of going into care as well. Like for myself, I don't think I would have done very well in a residential home. I think like
Right.
foster care was the right place for me.
Did you
But
have
then sort of,
place-
sorry,
did you have
David.
Did you have lots of placements? How many?
So I was sort of, it's always horrible to say. I don't like saying the word fortunate, but I feel very fortunate in the fact that I did have just the one placement that I kind of stayed through my entire time in care. So I went in care at the age of 15 and sort of then went to staying put until I went off to university and all of that stuff afterwards. But yeah, so I feel like hate using the word fortunate because like to me it's something that I sort of just feel very guilty about sort of saying, just because I've sort of spoken to so many other people in care that have sort of gone through very different stories entirely. But yeah, I had one sort of placement throughout the whole sort of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's hard to find now. I hear of kids moving 20, up, many, many times, you know. And I think that what people need is stability. You don't need to keep changing schools every few weeks, you know, or if a child has to move, make sure they stay in the same school, you know.
Mm.
It's so, you know, I can't imagine. I've got a son now, and you know, he goes between me and his mum. He spends a week with me, a week with mum, and he so knows he belongs in both of those places. You know, obviously we're not together and all that sort of stuff, but you know, he's got a very good sense of belonging here and with mum, and we both, you know, we both tell him that he's loved in both of those places. But I think when you're a foster kid and, you know, you know, honestly, and I live on a boat, so we know that, right? I live on a boat, and obviously the toilet facilities are different to a house. You know,
Yeah.
can you imagine walking into someone's house and feeling comfortable to use the bathroom in a house you've never been in before? Do you know what I mean? And it's just things like that that I just don't think they think about, you know?
Honestly, they don't. Like, me and Dylan were even having this discussion. Like, when you are with another young person who is a care leaver, you naturally start to compare stories. And I've been in like more than five, and I've actually been in residentials, just like you, David. And
Right.
a lot of our stories are quite similar, which I don't know, it's just so weird. But
Did you mind residential? Was the residential good or not?
I thought it was amazing, like the sort of independence and the fact that you don't have to worry about, okay, cool, and the next day I'm gonna be moved to another family. I have to reintroduce myself. I have to build that relationship, which I think a lot of care leavers are struggling with at the moment. And with the sense of belonging as well, like what you've said before, your son, has you to, look after. And I don't think at any point that he's gonna have this identity crisis that a lot of us have had.
Yeah,
But for me, I kind of had the belonging in sense of my school stayed the same, even though
good.
my personal life kind of was impacted a lot. But yeah, like we shouldn't be calling a belonging, a sense of belonging, something that we should be fortunate to have. I think it
Yeah.
should just be natural.
And Dylan, I understand why you feel fortunate because you look around and you see so many other people who had a worse experience than you. And I think that's valuable that you know that you had a good time. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, don't feel upset to say that other people aren't as fortunate because we know that they probably aren't as fortunate, you know, and they are being moved around a lot and they're not getting, you know, it's difficult. And you know, I was a foster carer as well. So I've got
Brilliant.
Were you?
Okay.
I've got 20 young people who I either mentored or had a
Oh my.
fostering arrangement with. And I've applied that same thing to them. One of them was going to come round today with his son. I told him that I had to do this at 2 o'clock, but he was going to come round to, you know, and I've kept in touch with most of them. I've got a couple that are always in and out of prison, but most of them when I had my 50th birthday party, 12 of them showed up. And that was the happiest thing. I was more happy that they came than my stepmom came, if you know what I mean.
That's incredible, especially like 12 people came, like sort of people that you sort of previously foster cared for. That's just incredible. Like, yeah. And yeah, just going back to the previous thing as well. Yeah, thank you so much for sort of saying that. It's really nice to hear. And yeah, it just kind of, I think like that sort of fortunate, I always hate using that word. I need to
Yeah.
think of a better one for it. But like sort of, yeah, I think that's part of the why I'm so focused on really like sort of pushing for change and everything. I think that's one of the core reasons because I do like I want everyone to have as sort of seamless a sort of time and care as possible. I don't want them to have to go through horrible journeys or anything like that as well. So I think that's like part of my sort of big passion for sort of like pushing for change really. So yeah,
And,
thank you
and
so much.
got ammunition to tell them how good it can be because
Yeah.
you've experienced it, you know, and that's good. It shouldn't all be negative. We should be talking about the positive, you know, the positives of being in care. There are some positives, you know. It's a very bad situation to be away from your parents. I can't imagine my son not being in my life and not being living with me and his mum. I just can't imagine it. I wouldn't let it happen. I mean, you know, I just wouldn't let it happen.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think sort of Salma, do you want to sort of ask any sort of follow-up questions to that, or are we sort of all right to move on?
Yeah, I think we're okay to
Okay,
move on.
cool. So yeah, just moving on to the next one then. So like just going sort of like back a bit. So yeah, we're doing a bit of like a ping pong between like journalism and sort of activism a little bit. But I was just sort of wondering if you could sort of share a little success story, just from sort of any sort of things in your time. So I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but I think in your bio that you sort of sent over, it said you sort of had a bit of time in Who Cares, as sort of an organisation as well. But sort of just with that, NAPIC, Black in Care, or any of the other amazing things that you've been
Well,
involved with that I haven't mentioned. I'm just wondering if you could share something that you're particularly proud of, like a success story within that. That's all right.
I'm very proud of Who Cares. I was involved in the first national magazine. It was run by Westminster Social Service, and it was sent out to Westminster kids. It was a magazine, a photo story, which told real experiences of kids in care. It went national, and I was on the editorial board. And it then turned into a campaigning organisation, which it is today, which is Who Cares. It's a movement now, whereas it started out in a little magazine. And I must mention the woman called Tori Lockland, Victoria, but she liked to be called Tori. Tori Lockland started that in Westminster and made it national. She unfortunately passed away from cancer at quite an early age, actually. And she was determined to get this magazine to every kid in care. So I'm very proud of that. That also helped me towards getting my job in the media, because I'd actually edited a magazine with a group of people. See, all these little things that we do in campaigning can help us in our career, and I don't see why they shouldn't. They absolutely should, especially if it's along a similar line. So I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of being a father. I can't tell you the joy that my son has brought to me. I was one of those people who didn't think I could have children because of some of the things that I experienced as a child. And I needed counselling to be able to be a parent because I wasn't parented. But I think everybody who's been in care deserves counselling. I really think it's
Absolutely.
important. Really think it's important for us to overcome and understand what's happened to us, the trauma it's caused, the way we've reacted to that trauma. Because I don't know about you, but I went through a period when I was a teenager when I wanted to smash everything up, and I sometimes did. You know, temper tantrums, you know, explosions. I was frustrated. I wanted to talk about things, but there was no one to talk to. So I do think that it's a really good exercise for people who've been in care to have some therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like, I think, yeah, because a lot of sort of people in care, I think it's sort of almost a prerequisite sort of for being in care that you all sort of come in with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, just with sort of some of the things that have happened previously before us. That might be some of the reasons you went into care in the first place as well. So I think, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think like I hope that's echoed throughout sort of the nation, really, just sort of like the vital need of sort of counselling and sort of therapy to care experience young people. So
And I was working with middle class people who didn't have hardly a care in the world, 2 cars, nanny, good job, and all. And they were in counselling, they were in therapy, and hardly anything had happened to them. Do you know what I mean? Maybe Waitrose didn't have what they wanted on the shelves, but I just thought to myself, you know, if this is so useful for them, I want to talk through some of the things that happened to me and how I feel about that and what that's done to me. So yeah, counselling, very important.
definitely.
First of all, before I ask the next question, I'm just glad that you chose to obviously be a parent, because the way that you speak about your son is,
Mm.
um, but of course, like, you know, your life has probably changed within the last 10 years. But again, we did discuss about your Guardian article that I really, really like, I'm obsessed with. I think everyone should go listen to, like, read it over, because, yeah, I think it's truly like magnificent. But in that article, in The Guardian, you said that young people can't just feel abandoned, which was a direct quote from you. And as young people, like, we feel that this still happens. And, you know, it's a generational thing. I don't think that's ever going to go away soon. What drives you to keep going despite the slow progress? And I think you've mentioned that before as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know whether you know that just recently there's someone called Fatima Whitbread who's come out to run a
Oh,
campaign. Yeah.
we know her
Well,
very well.
good. So I think it's important that anybody who can gets up and says what they can. And you know, like you said before, Sam, was so important. It doesn't necessarily have to be when you're 18, 19, 20. It might be once you've got your family and you've got your life sorted out and you realize where mistakes were made. Maybe then you can come back, because that's very much what Fatma's done. Fatma,
Yeah,
you know, she's achieved so much in her life, and now she's using that to get people to focus on who she was as a teenager. And I think that's fantastic. Lem Sise, you know, another person who has reached the heights, you know, of doing well in his life, and he will still talk to people about being in care. And it's so
his
important that
book
we
as
all,
well.
you know, that we all out there. And you know, I sometimes meet people. I was never ashamed of being in care, and when I was at the BBC in that first job interview, I told them up front. And I think that there is a willingness out there for people to give us the benefit of the doubt. As well as there are people who are going to discriminate against us, there are people out there who would say, "Oh, that person's been in care. They've come to me for a job. What can I do to try and, you know?" Waitrose have done it. John Lewis, you know, John Lewis partnerships have done it. I used to say years ago when I was campaigning, why aren't local authorities training up young people in care to be lawyers, to be gardeners, to be all the things that the council runs? That's their family. Why aren't they using their resources to further the children that they have raised? And I think that's a really important message. And I think that's really coming out now, where people in society are saying, what can we do? They're of us. It takes a village to raise a child. We need companies, we need businesses, we need all these people to give us a break. And they are now, but we need more, obviously.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, and just on the lawyer one as well, yeah, I think I've noticed recently, I don't know if you've heard of lawyers who care before, but I think, yeah, that's sort of just a prime example of just sort of, yeah, like sort of like getting care experienced people in aspiring to be lawyers and help and support in that community. I think it's just fantastic. If you haven't, like, I don't know if you said you had heard of it or not before,
No,
but
I hadn't heard of
yeah,
it. Should
yeah.
exist. So I'm
Yeah,
glad.
no, I really recommend checking it out because it's just a fantastic organization, and they sort of, yeah, like for any care experienced young person aspiring to be sort of a lawyer, sort of having a law career, they sort of like help sort of get you through that pathway of like mentorship and lots of amazing other things as well. So it was like a prime example of, yeah, like the sort of stuff you're saying, and me, and sort of I think Salma also nodded her head when we were talking as well, just about, yeah,
Yeah.
helping
Well,
care experienced young people get into careers and just helping them along the way. Like, I think it's
yeah.
just amazing. So, yeah.
There is another one, David. I'm not quite sure if you know it, but it's called like it's the internship with civil service. If you've heard about
Yeah,
that one
I
yet?
have heard about that.
Yeah.
And absolutely, they bloody well should be doing that. They should have been the first people doing that, because they're actually responsible for the system that turns us out. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really important one. And you know, I've even met. I'm an ambassador for the Reese Foundation, and one of the
Oh,
other
I love the Reese Foundation. Yeah.
Okay. One of the other ambassadors I don't know where he is now. He's somewhere in the world, you know, working as working for diplomats, but he's from the care system. And they absolutely, the local councils, the government should all be doing what they can to employ us and to make us employable. You know, because, you know, the other thing is that generations, you know, some care families have been in care for generations, and we need to break that cycle. And I know people who have done that, you know, through getting a good education and so on and so forth. They've broken that cycle. They've raised their own children. Their children have not been in care, but their mum and their grandma and their great grandma were all in the care system. You know, we've got to break that cycle, and that's how we're going to do it. Give people opportunities, allow them to work, give them a break. You know, they've not had all the advantages other people have had.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. But I was just wondering, just as like a final little question, just before we move on to that, if you could sort of had like, the opportunity to speak directly to every young person in care, what would you say to them?
I would say find people who love you, who like you, who care about you. It might be an ex-girlfriend's mum. It could be, but you know, find someone who genuinely cares about you, because a lot of people are paid to care about you. That's different, right? Have someone in your life who genuinely cares about you and wants the best for you. That's my advice to young people in care.
Thank you so much, Shane. That's, yeah, like, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah, and yeah, I think we're sort of talking before, like sort of with other sort of discussions we had when we were like preparing for the podcast about like the importance of lifelong links and sort of having that one person or just group of support network people around you just to sort of keep you going. Like, I think this is
It might be
fantastic.
a
So
teacher.
thank you.
It might be a teacher. You know, I had a great drama teacher who, in fact, I wouldn't have done any public speaking as an adult had she not recognized something in me when I was young, when everybody else thought, oh, he's just a glue sniffer. He's in the children's home. Don't worry about him. You know, but she said, David, you're really good at talking. You could make money out, and I have, you can make money out of this. You know, you could be a presenter. You could be a TV presenter. And look what happened. I did, you know, and she died recently and her daughter got in touch with me because she'd seen that I'd said some kind words about her mum and she wanted to use them at the funeral. So, you know, I really admire people who go out of their way. Obviously, you've got to be careful because there's a lot of bad people out there as well who would take advantage of looked after children, as we know. But
Yeah.
that's why I'm suggesting teacher or girlfriend's, you know, girlfriend's mum or somebody we know. They can get a
Well, I
special.
wouldn't recommend the ex though, not the ex.
No, not. I had an ex whose mum really loved me, and I knew she really loved me, the mum, and you know, she's been a constant support to me. I don't have much to do with her daughter anymore, but I'm still in the mum.
Yeah, brilliant.
That was
Sorry, Salma.
no, they're an ex for a reason, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just wanted to like, just before we like sort of wrap up and everything, I think I can speak on behalf of me and Salma as well. And Salma, if you want to add any comments later, please go ahead. Thank you so much for like sort of just speaking with us today. I mean, all of your reflections and just talking about sort of your journey to becoming a journalist, all of the sort of campaigning that you've done as well, and sort of sharing some really amazing stories as well. I just thank you so much. I mean, I don't think I spoke much during this sort of whole thing. I was just sort of sitting back and just so intently listening. Everything you had to say was so insightful and just,
Oh,
I really loved hearing from you. So thank you so much.
and thank you for the great questions, by the way. Really good
That's all
question,
right.
really thoughtful.
Honestly, you just made it a lot easier to, you know, even your bio and everything. Like, I read into it, and obviously I did a little bit of stalking myself and into like
You
the
Googled me, oh
web
God.
and found. Oh yeah, so it's not bad, I promise you. But I did see some of your tweets, you know.
I can
But but I think you know, like you're just a huge inspiration. Throughout the whole podcast, like there were things that I could relate to, and I know a lot of other people who are listening could relate to it. So thank you so much for your transparency and your vulnerability, because a lot of people would shy away from sharing personal stories, but for you it just came so easily. So thank you so much for showing your humanity and like and everything else. So thank you. I appreciate it. So
No, well, thank you for asking me. And you know, as someone who's like 60, got the free bus pass and all that, I'm just glad to be relevant to you. Do you know what I mean? Because I do identify with you, and I want people to know that they can have a great life, that they can have a family, that they can keep their kids, that they can just be wonderful. I mean, I'm not saying I'm wonderful, but I've had a really good life as an adult, you know? And I think that's what we need to look forward to. We need to think about what we want to do in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, have some goals. And, you know, if I can pass that on to people at my stage in life, I'm more than happy to. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Caring About Care is produced by Quorum Voice and A National Voice. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thank you.